Omar Abrego Garcia. You know his name, I know his name, America knows his name. He has received no due process, and he has become kind of the banner name for leading the charge against the illegal immigration enforcement processes that the Trump administration has pretended to try to say actually works when we all know that it hasn't. But what has Kilmer Abrego Garcia done? Well, folks, he has now filed an amended complaint, an amended lawsuit in federal court in Maryland. It is a 40-page lawsuit, and it's important because it documents and it verifies.
I mean, we already knew. I mean, the I said it from the beginning. The president down there in El Salvador was sending his political opponents to this court, violated a lot of civil rights, and I mean, it was just known as a prison that you don't just people die there, and nobody gives a fuck. So we knew it was going to be a reality that they were going to be victims of some civil and victims of some civil rights violations. Now we're hearing it for real this time, but now the lawsuits are coming, and I told y'all, we're gonna spend billions on lawsuits, okay? Oh man, I need to tell my fucking attorney to get. What time is it in Japan? Time. It's 14 hours in. 12. Yeah. He should start getting some clients in this.
And it corroborates that Nayib Bukele, the president of El Salvador, is running a prison called CICOT that we've heard that people from the United States have been sent to in the dead of night over their objections. And it is a horrible facility, and it is one that the United States has basically conscripted to be used on their own to be able to house in constructive custody people that otherwise should be here in the United States. Now, this lawsuit is important. It's being brought by Kilmer Armando Abrego Garcia, which is his full name, his wife, Jennifer Stefania Vasquez Sura, and his minor child, known by the initials of AAV, as in Victor. He's suing Kristi Noem, Pam Bondi, Marco Rubio. But I wanted to highlight a few things from this lawsuit for you because it's really important. And again, Kilmer Abrego Garcia has now confirmed in his lawsuit that there is torture. There is torture and abuse that is being inflicted upon the people that are at CICOT. Now, before you come out me and you say, oh, well, Katie, it's a prison, and it's a prison for terrorists and gang people. I get it, okay? But guess what? You can't abuse and torture those people too. It's still a prison, and I understand that you may be an advocate for incarceration, which, let me be very clear, I am an advocate for incarceration for people that have committed crimes, but you cannot abuse them and you cannot torture them, and that is what...
Exactly. I mean, not only is it against our laws, not only is it one of the reasons we have habeas corpus, and habeas corpus is from around the world because people used to get locked up, used to get tortured, used to get beaten and killed by people and authority, you know. But it's just about decency. No matter your feelings on immigration, legal, illegal, you know, should he been deported, should he not have been deported, it's like, yo, these are human beings. They aren't cattle. They aren't chickens, you know. These are human beings. They have family, friends, love, feelings, you know, physical needs, and we're supposed to be better than this. We're supposed to be the best country in the world. Why are we acting like this? Why are we acting like we're some fucking third world country that just overthrew their government, and now we're securing our control by arresting and deporting anybody we that with brown skin. Like why? I mean, that's probably the goal. That's probably the goal. Fucking Laura Loomer, the little the racist bitch who sometimes calls out their bullshit. Yo, she said she. So we're gonna get to that. Okay, well, I'll wait to get.
Abrego Garcia says is happening. So the lawsuit is very clear. In paragraph 5 of his lawsuit, he clearly says that the defendants, meaning Kristi Noem, Pam Bondi, and others, including Marco Rubio, they have a disdain for the law and legal process. Their cruelty shocks the conscience and demands immediate, sustained judicial relief and oversight. It also marks a profound constitutional crisis in which executive agencies have repeatedly and deliberately flouted the authority of multiple federal courts, including the Supreme Court itself. The integrity of our constitutional republic and the rule of law depends on plaintiff Abrego Garcia's ability to obtain complete relief for these egregious wrongs, lest we accept a government that operates above the law and beyond the reach of judicial authority. End quote. Boom. That accurately, very quickly summarizes the constitutional crisis that we face right now. And the lawsuit goes on to describe how those agencies and those people like Noem and Bondi and Rubio and DHS and ICE, that they completely and constantly and continue to flout judicial orders, and that they continue to give the middle finger to the judiciary when they should be giving it the equal respect that it deserves. So let's move on. Now, important note to remind everybody, the defendants, the United States government, admitted that the removal of Abrego Garcia was an administrative error. Now remember that, right? There has been an admission that Kilmar Abrego Garcia's removal from the United States was an administrative error. And I'm going to footnote this because you guys will remember here at the Katie Faye News Channel, I covered Emile Bove's nomination for the Third Circuit Court of Appeals and how a whistleblower came forward, Arez Ravani, and how he said he's the lawyer that went to court and said that it was an administrative error to remove Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And remember how all of the whistleblower letter came out and it said that there's been affirmative lies that have been told to the courts from DHS and ICE and the DOJ? Well, yeah, so it was an administrative error. And here is the relevant law, and there's a lot of it here in the lawsuit, but I want to make sure you guys understand the basis of this.
So, funny story. The governor of Arizona, Democrat, vetoed 3 bills that they had 2 or 3 budget bills that they sent her way because they weren't balanced budgets. Okay. Republicans tried to force her hand, and she said no. Now they have a balanced budget. However, now with the Medicaid cuts and the SNAP cuts, if they're expected to, take care of their constituents, if they're expected to keep Arizona healthy, then they are going to. It's going to cost them money. They probably not going to have a balanced budget anymore.
Federal law prohibits the government from removing a non-citizen to a country where they are more likely than not to face persecution on account of a statutorily protected ground. This protection is typically referred to as a withholding of removal. That is what Kilmar Abrego Garcia had. An immigration judge, prior to him being illegally removed recently, an immigration judge a few years ago said that I'm going to enter a withholding of removal order so that Abrego Garcia doesn't get returned to the country where he was going to be facing persecution, torture, or abuse. But of course, we do know that that has since happened and that he's since been brought back. That's a whole other conversation. Let's go on. Now, starting in paragraph 43 in the facts of this lawsuit, it says clearly, Plaintiff Abrego Garcia is a citizen of El Salvador and no other country. Plaintiff Abrego Garcia is not a member of and has no affiliation with Tren de Aragua, MS-13, or any other criminal or street gang. And here's the kicker, paragraph 45. Although Plaintiff Abrego Garcia has been accused of general, quote, gang affiliation, the U.S. government has never produced credible evidence supporting this accusation, and there has been no finding made by any judicial tribunal of any sort.
Okay. So just a little break in that. I don't think we're gonna watch the whole thing. Because I want to go. There's some other immigration stuff I want to talk about. But I feel like this is worrisome. The U.S. dollar is down 11%, so it's less than $1 now. $1 isn't $1 anymore, so that I feel like that should be more troubling. But I don't know. I don't know money.
Such affiliation, an important, uncontroverted fact. No evidence has been brought forward by the federal government to support the idea that Kilmer Abrego Garcia is a member of Tren de Aragua, the gang from El Salvador. Prior to April 2025, Plaintiff Abrego Garcia had no criminal history. Separate and apart from his May 21st, 2025 Tennessee indictment, remember that bullshit one that they did to be able to bring him back from El Salvador to face federal charges, he has never been charged or convicted of any criminal charges in the United States, El Salvador, or any other country. Didn't Donald Trump say that he was just going to be kicking out of the country all the violent people? Guy's never had any prior contact with the criminal justice system. Paragraph 76. Before his unlawful removal, Plaintiff Abrego Garcia was a union member and was employed full-time as a first-year sheet metal apprentice. In addition, he had been pursuing his own license at the University of Maryland. As a condition of his withholding of removal status, he is required to check in with ICE once a year. He has been fully compliant. He appeared for his most recent check-in on January 2nd, 2025 without incident. And they attach actually here as an exhibit to this lawsuit his check-in records. Paragraph 79 just reinforces. There remains no known link or association between him and the MS-13 gang or any other gang, and no judicial tribunal has found that any such link or association exists. Again, underscoring that there are no facts or evidence that supports the government's claim that Kilmer Abrego Garcia is a member of a gang, and that's the reason why he should be removed from the United States. Now, the lawsuit continues to go on, and it's worth reading, people, because it makes clear that Abrego Garcia was duped time and time again by the federal government. After he was taken into custody and before he was removed to CCOT in El Salvador, he asked to speak to a lawyer. He wanted to be able to see a judge. He wanted to make sure that he got the relief that he was legally required to receive. And every time he was reassured falsely that he wasn't going to be deported to El Salvador, but rather was being transported to Texas to appear before a judge. Relying on this misrepresentation, Plaintiff Abrego Garcia cooperated with further transport. Now, this is before they took him from Maryland, and that they were going to put him on a flight to Louisiana, and then he was going to go to Texas. I mean, remember, the federal government is moving people around very quickly, so it makes it harder for them to not only have counsel and representation, but harder for people like us and family members to be able to find them, to be able to help them. And that was paragraph 92. Paragraph 99. Abrego Garcia consistently kept on telling them, look, I have legal permission to work in the United States until 2029. I have a withholding of removal. He repeatedly requested judicial review. Officials consistently responded with false assurances that he would see a judge, deliberately misleading Plaintiff Abrego Garcia. Now, eventually, when he made it to El Salvador and he was put in CCOT, his family hired a lawyer in El Salvador. Paragraph 105. To date, there are no known criminal charges levied against Plaintiff Abrego Garcia in El Salvador. Paragraph 106. ICE and DHS have taken no steps to reopen the removal case of Plaintiff Abrego Garcia, nor to challenge or rescind his withholding order. Now, here's where it gets particularly upsetting, because now we actually have a first-hand description of how people are treated when they are in custody at CCOT.
I'm glad he's suing the shit out of them.
Like, he already said, oh, Mr. President, thank you for my country where my family members live still. That was awesome. And now, thank you, Mr. President, for taking my wife away.
Yeah, this is the guy. This is the fucking guy.
Iranian sleeper cell agent.
Meanwhile, an Iranian woman detained by
It's really messed up. Yeah, think about the billionaires is correct. AOC could. Anyway, let's get back to reality, of course. MAGA mom detained by ICE. Her husband says he'll still support Trump. That is insane. Okay.
federal agents. She and her family, all supporters of President Trump. See the MAGA hats. President Fox 11's Matthew Seedorf live for us in Diamond Bar. And Matthew, those Trump flags staying up tonight.
Yeah, those flags staying up. This family still supports Donald Trump despite their mom being detained. The final moments home.
Brainwashed, bro. Brainwashed cult followers. Yeah, I know he's hurting me. Yeah, I know the Democratic president had no problem with my wife staying with my family, with our kids, while we work through her green card issues. While those are pending, it was not a problem under the Democrats, but I voted for this guy and now it's a problem, so my wife's getting deported, but I still support that guy. Because now all of a sudden it's a problem for my wife to be here. Holy shit, I don't know if I can watch this story. Pravity I was talking about.
Because it truly is a lie that we are separated from this land. And that is the lie that has built this. And we deserve so much better.
That's the added insult of this monstrosity, alligator Alcatraz. This is indigenous land. Indigenous land with multiple Native American tribes that they're putting this through.
Hey, it's Jordan with Status Coup.
This is Ashley with Status Coup.
On the ground.
In Philadelphia.
Flint, Michigan. East Palestine, Ohio. Please support the leading independent news outlet on the ground.
Covering what the corporate media covers up.
Hey, it's Jordan with Status Coup. In less than 24 hours after opening, Trump's ICE alligator Alcatraz hellhole that Status Coup and Ashley Bishop are currently on the ground in South Florida covering. Support us and our on-the-ground reporting for as low as $5 a month. We need your support to keep going. It's already flooding. It's already flooding. And from what I could tell, the mostly outdoor ICE prison surrounded by alligators has no real hurricane plan as we're headed into the worst of Florida's hurricane season, where potentially 5,000 undocumented immigrants are going to be in an outdoor ICE prison surrounded by alligators in the bullseye of hurricanes. What could go wrong? Let me show you first the flooding. This was on day one of the grand opening that they crowed about. Let me show you here. To be clear, this facility on a airstrip in an aviation training center in Okeechobee, Florida, Southwest Florida, was built in less than a week to house potentially up to 5,000 beds.
Fucking Florida. Fucking Florida. Holy shit. They built They were able to build 5,000 beds in under a week. They were able to build 5,000 beds in under a week. Okay. Let's see. Homeless population, Miami. Y'all are seeing this, right? Y'all y'all seen this, right? There's 1,000 unsheltered individuals. Miami-Dade County Homeless Trust achieved a 17% year-over-year reduction. Consensus U.S. recorded a total of 858. Damn! They needed half those beds. Less than half those beds. And they would have 0 unsheltered individuals. What? Overall, the total number of sheltered and unsheltered individuals enumerated was 3,728. So if they would have spent that money, they would have 0 homeless on... They would have enough beds for no homeless people in Miami. They would not have a homeless problem in Miami if they built half those beds in Miami. Built it in 8 days. It's going to cost $450 million. And luckily, it's getting paid for by Florida. So the Floridians are paying for this. Instead of taking those 865 people that aren't living in a shelter and putting them in a shelter, they're going to spend $450 million on a year housing 5,000 immigrants. Good fucking job. Way to own the libs. You know, we're going to spend more money on incarcerating illegals instead of helping the 868 homeless people in Miami. Round of applause for Florida. Holy shit, they're fucking idiots.
$450 million. $450 million a year. How's that, Florida? Having an affordable housing crisis. They found the FEMA money they could steal to pay for this monster.
No shot.
I want to play this.
No shot.
There are electrical wires all over that flooding. I found this on TikTok.
That's going to be so funny if that's
and helpful. Let's take a listen.
That's alligator outfits. It's already flooding. It's already flooding. Yeah, I made a video yesterday talking about what happens when there's water that starts coming in underneath tents in areas where lots of people are kept.
It's so fucking
sick. You see the problem in that video?
Yo,
what's
that's
laying
so
on the floor
sick.
where the water's coming in?
That's so
Electrical
sick,
cords.
bro.
What could happen?
They could have
when
ended homelessness
is
in Miami.
To water in an area that has a bunch of metal in it.
Well, what happens when there's a hurricane? And there's even a Category 1 or Category 2 in this facility that was built in less than a week. I don't know all of the electrical there. I'm sure they don't either. I don't even know what the wastewater sewer system is like. They say there's air conditioning throughout. Believe it when I see it, based on the reporting we've done at the other ICE prisons elsewhere. I'm not sure that's true. And by the way, it seems to be from the quotes I've seen that the hurricane plan for this prison surrounded by alligators is all but non-existent. To be clear, this is a outdoor ICE prison. The detention center, built on a remote airstrip in the Everglades, can hold up to 5,000 migrants in tents and trailers. Tents and trailers. And those trailers are not completely enclosed. So This is outdoors for all intents and purposes. Let me show you what the head of Florida's version. Let me show you what the head of Florida's version of FEMA had to say yesterday about their so-called plan in the event of hurricanes.
Contingencies, as with all state correctional facilities, we have a hurricane plan. We will not wait for a Cat 2. We will follow our normal evacuation procedures as we do for any other facility statewide in our great state of Florida. We have on-site fire and EMS resources so that we do not we don't burden the locals with any type of response.
And Kevin Guthrie also said the facility has an aluminum frame structure that's rated for winds for 110 miles per hour, which is a high-end Category 2 hurricane, and they also have backup generators.
Oh, so he said they have the protective structure to sustain a high-end Category 2 hurricane. Well, I went to school down in Florida. I could tell you, in the last 20 years, been quite a few that go beyond a Category 2. And they have the structure and protective equipment to sustain a high-end Category 1 or 2 when a lot of the facility is outdoors? Huh. I don't know of many outdoor facilities that have been tested in a Category 2 hurricane. Usually people go to shelters during hurricanes or stay in their indoor homes. And this is in one of the top areas for hurricanes in Florida. If you look at the most hurricane-prone areas in Florida, number 2, Southwest Florida, where this is.
The other fucking thing. It's like, okay, I'm not gonna lie. All right, there's a little dark, not so great part of me that was like, hey, you know, a fucking prison with an alligator moat. That's kind of cool, okay? That's kind of cool. All right, not what they're doing with it, but you know, just in general, moats are cool with sharks and stuff. Like Despicable Me, he had a moat. It's cool, like with a shark with a laser on it. But anyways, beyond that, okay? Just put it somewhere that isn't in a hurricane path. Put it somewhere that doesn't flood. Put it somewhere like that you don't have to worry about the elements like this, where you don't have to have a hurricane evacuation plan. I don't know, like, wow. 49. They have 49.
Total of 49 hurricanes they've had, including 17 that were Category 3 through 5, which is more and higher than the head of Florida's FEMA just described. And I'll just show you some of our footage. This is the benefit of being on the ground, doing actual journalism on the ground. Ashley Bishop, our reporter, was there. She covered the protests on the day of the opening. She's still down there doing reporting and interviews. We'll be posting some more of those as we go. Look at the amount of rain that is falling after the main protest on Tuesday.
Needed that.
And powerful
They were
speeches.
talking
But
about
look at
not
the amount of rain just right outside.
playing that game.
The outdoor ice alligator tent prison, to the point that people have to literally hold the awning above, the tent above.
And there's egregious misunderstandings on every side for these important issues, which lead to both the death of the Everglades and the death of Palestinians by genocide. Guys, I know that you know
It's all one. It's all one thing. Like, at one point I was like, you know, especially at the rallies that I went to, protest rallies that I went to, there was just a little bit too, like, everywhere, all over. But now I'm like, there are so many reasons to protest. There are so many reasons that what's happening is not as okay. We do have to get behind one message, but that message is just like, be good, you know? that message is just to be good. Like, let's just do the right thing. Let's just do the what's best for Americans, what's best for everyone. Let's make things fair. Let's make things easier. Like the Zoran, they're like, you don't like capitalism. He's like, yeah, but I'm gonna make it easier for businesses in New York to pay their whatever fees or whatever. He's gonna try to make he's gonna deregulate in a way where it doesn't they're able to lower their prices. So there's just a middle ground that we can find, and it helps everyone. We're just trying to help as many as we can, and the Republicans are just helping the ones who can help them.
Like it shouldn't need to be said, every part of this plan is so egregious, and we can't dehumanize immigrants further by referring to their struggle as simply a quote-unquote divisive issue. Yeah. Okay. So let's stand for humanity, okay? When we stand up for the Everglades, we do stand up for humanity. When we stand up for immigrants, when we stand against these arbitrary lines dividing us, we stand for humanity. Yeah. All of that.
That's good.
So
I like her.
Yeah, sure, category 1, 2, 3. It'll be fine with the 5,000 prisoners that you have to evacuate within hours and find shelter for. I'm sure it will be fine, and I'm sure it will be the Trump administration and the local Florida government's top priority to get these undocumented prisoners to safe harbor. Do you see the amount of rain? And that's not a hurricane. That's not a hurricane. Let me show you another clip. Again, this is from our...
That's what I'm saying. Like, at first I was like, okay, whatever. And then I saw the little rain. I was like, okay. And then, like, literally hurricane season started. We just got a shit ton of rain here in Austin. So the Gulf is already active. We get our rain from, Houston and the Gulf of Mexico.
Or on the ground reporting. Do you see CNN down there showing you that? MSNBC, New York Times, other independent outlets, support us. Statuscoup.com/join. I'm asking for 16 cents a day. That's what $5 a month is. So we can continue doing this important on-the-ground reporting. If you don't support us, we're not going to be able to do it for that much longer, to be honest. Let me show you another clip. Again, this is from Ashley's reporting down there. Here we go.
Yeah, I just first want to start by thanking the leadership that put this together. Thank you all for having us here in your camp, right? Because we stand here also with the truth of the colonization that has happened on this land. We stand knowing what migration has caused, right? And I was connecting with some of my folks in Colombia, indigenous leaders out there, and they were telling me about this long prophecy, right? And I felt it here in this moment because it was the Condor is like our big, bird, and it was a time when the Condor and the Eagle would come together, right? It was a time where across the nation, right, they would be coming together. And I see this connection. I see how it happened today because Unidos, right? We have people of the global south, right? We have the people of the Condor, and here we had our so many of our indigenous leaders, Miccosukee, who stood with us as immigrant communities and who built that solidarity bond despite everything that's happened, because it has. And I do see this as an opportunity for us to heal as people. Because it truly is a lie that we are separated from this land. And that is the lie that has built this. And we deserve so much better. Yeah. And I pray that this opens up our hearts. And it has for me. because that is the medicine. When they came, they tried to put so much hate in our hearts, but we transmuted to joy. We transmuted to care. We transmuted to everything that we know that is possible. And they are going to do, and they have tried so much to divide us.
That's the added insult of.
Yeah, that's what they're doing. With Zoran too. They're trying to make a big deal that, you know, when you fill out like applications and stuff, they ask you what's your what your race and ethnicity is. And Zoran, quite unique. His parents are Asian Indian, you know, from India, but he was born in Ghana, Africa. So he put both Asian and African American. I'm like, yeah, that fits him. Like, they just changed it too. Like, I was always like Hispanic, Latino. Now, like, sometimes I can put Hispanic, but then the next question is like, are you white or Asian American or Asian African or other? I'm like, fuck, I guess I'm white. Like, god damn it. Like, it's at this point, like that's like the norm for people. Like, what the fuck?
This monstrosity, alligator Alcatraz, this is indigenous land. Indigenous land with multiple Native American tribes that they're putting this through, in addition to other minorities. I want to show you another clip shot by Ashley and John down there.
And I came out here because, not just because of my mom and my family, mostly because where I come from and where we live, I have many undocumented friends, and I cherish them to my heart. And if I see them just being ripped apart from their families and ripped apart from what the people they love and the people and the land they cherish, that is not okay. We sit here because we are privileged enough to come out and protect the other people who can't come out for themselves. We are here because we believe in human rights and we believe in protecting the land and the people.
I like that.
And I want to say that honestly, this has been one of the best protests I've been to, and I've been to a lot of protests, not just for the land, human rights, actually mostly human rights, because this is it's.
Chill, bro. There's like 10 people there.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. We go now to Los Angeles, where armed mass federal agents have spent the last month carrying out arrests across the city. Families, immigrant advocates say they're struggling to find their loved ones when they are disappeared. In one case, the family of a community activist and mother, Juliana, they call her Yuli Pelez Calderon, said she was taken at gunpoint on June 25th by two men in unmarked cars who pulled over as she went to work at night, which is uncommon. She used a borrowed phone to call her family to say she was taken to a warehouse where women are held alongside men. She compared the men who took her to bounty hunters and has not had proper food or access to her medication. This is Stefano Medina, managing attorney with the LA office of
Yo, I heard about this, and it's a super really weird situation. It's so funny how ICE can work in this gray area of yeah, you're detained because you're illegal, but okay. So they're detaining them because they're illegal, and then they have to go get their due process, see themselves, and see a court and a judge. So instead, they're detaining them indefinitely without seeing a court. but asking them to sign a document saying they waive their right to due process and go ahead and deport me. That's what they're trying to do. Okay, so.
California Center for Movement Legal Services.
So DHS is out now saying that this is a hoax and that this is all made up, and because they don't have any record of Julie in their system, which I don't doubt. She's not in their system. But Julie, in that phone call that she made to her family from a borrowed phone, told us that she was taken directly from where she was picked up in South Central Los Angeles to San Ysidro, where she was presented to an ICE official and pressured to sign a voluntary self-deportation agreement.
Medina says Yuli's family filed a missing persons report with the LA Police Department as they continued their search for her. Meanwhile, the family of Andrea Velez, a U.S. citizen, described her arrest by ICE last month as a kidnapping. Andrea had just been dropped off at work by her mom and her sister when the pair witnessed masked federal agents grabbing her and taking Andrea in an unmarked car during an immigration raid. One video shows a masked agent lifting Andrea off the ground and carrying her away. Andrea's sister, Estrella Rosas, spoke with CBS News Los Angeles.
They didn't have a vest that said ICE or anything. Their cars didn't have license plates. Just because of the color of our skin, they think that we're criminals. My sister was there, so they she looks Hispanic, so let's take her too.
Ultimately, Andrea Velez was released, but was charged with assaulting a federal officer during her arrest. She spoke at a news conference last week.
They didn't identify themselves. I can't go through it, but I was just going to work. It was just a day of work, and everything happened so fast. So
Yeah, bro. We fit the description. They're not like, oh, you speak Spanish, oh, you have an accent. It's like, no. Look at that brown woman walking down the road. She's illegal. We're gonna take her in, bro. How is that? We'll come up with a charge afterwards. Oh my Jesus, how are we here? How are we here? How did we get here?
they didn't identify themselves, so I was kind of scared.
For more, we're joined in Los Angeles by Dominique Boubion. She is an attorney helping to represent Andrea Velez. This is just such an astounding story. Dominique, can you explain what happened as we watch her being carried with her arms under her chest as she walking forward? Where was she taken? Where was she held? How did you find out when she was disappeared and her family panicked?
Yes, of course. So we were contacted by the family later that day in the afternoon because they had seen, the mother had seen her daughter being taken by ICE agents and but didn't know they were ICE, had no idea who they were. And so they were terrified and looking for help just to locate her. And the video that you mentioned where she's being lifted and carried up, that's actually when she went to the police officers at LAPD asking for help, telling them these men are taking me. So I'll back up and explain what happened.
If you can explain that point. We're watching her being carried. Who is carrying her? And I do see police. I see the police cars, the LAPD. Who is carrying her?
So that is an ICE agent. We now know is an ICE agent. And she was being carried away from the LAPD officers that she went over to for help because she didn't know who the men were or where she was being taken. She had no idea. That morning, just minutes before, her mother had dropped her off at work on 9th and Main.
So I see the police cars, the LAPD. Who is carrying?
Had no idea who they were.
It's on camera?
And so they were terrified and looking for help just to locate her. And the video that you mentioned where she's being lifted and carried up, that's actually when she went to the police officers at LAPD.
Yo, sue the fuck out of everybody. Sue the fuck out of the LAPD. Sue the fuck out of ICE. Sue the fuck out of Donald Trump himself. Are you fucking kidding me? A brown woman on the way to fucking work gets picked up. A United States citizen on the way to work.
Asking for help, telling them.
Are you fucking kidding me, bro?
So I'll back up and explain what happened.
If you could, during her arrest, she spoke at a news conference last week.
I'm a U.S. citizen. I'm a U.S. citizen, bro.
Do it, but
like, what do I have my ID in my car. Like, what do?
Day of work. And,
Do I need to carry my passport around?
The video that you mentioned where she's being lifted and carried up, that's actually when she went to the police.
Do I have to
officers
carry
on
my
TV
fucking
asking for help, telling them these men are taking me. So I'll back up and explain what happened.
If you can explain that point, we're watching her being carried. Who is carrying her? And I do see police. I see the police cars, the LAPD. Who is carrying her?
So that is an ICE agent. We now know is an ICE agent. And she was being carried away from the LAPD officers that she went over to for help because she didn't know who the men were or where she was being taken. She had no idea. That morning, just minutes before, her mother had dropped her off at work on 9th and Main, downtown LA. And as she exited the vehicle, she walked 3-4 steps onto the sidewalk, and suddenly there was a swarm of vehicles surrounding her. So as she's kind of getting her bearings, what's going on, she sees vendors over to her right, and she assumes, okay, this must be, maybe it's a raid, I don't know. She sees men approaching them, but she looks to her left, and she sees an ICE agent about 10 feet away running full speed at her, and becomes terrified. She's 4'11". This is a man who, in her estimation, is over 6 feet. He's masked, and he does not stop. So she gets scared, and her reaction is to hover and block herself to protect herself, and she's thrown to the ground. The ICE agent continues on for about another 10-15 seconds to get their target, and then returns and tells her she's under arrest for what she describes as interfering. She gets put into a vehicle, an unmarked van, and she's in handcuffs. And while she's
not gonna lie, she doesn't even look like the ones who would like, no knock on her, no, but like, she doesn't look like one who would be like jumping on the ICE agents to stop somebody from, getting abducted. Okay, yeah, I think I'm gonna go get another.
Waiting,
of my
she
special
sees the officer, so she walks over to the officer and asks for if he would help her. She doesn't know who these men are, and that's when you see the ICE agent pick her up and take her back to the unmarked van.
Why was she picked up, Dominique?
She physically picked up, or why was she arrested?
Arrested.
So what she is being charged with is assault on a peace officer. So the version of the story that the federal agent is putting forth is that Andrea Velez purposefully walked into his path in order to protect whoever their target was, and knocked that ICE agent off balance and hit him in the head. It's a complete fabrication, didn't happen. And I believe it's more of number one, racial profiling. They were speaking to her in Spanish, even though she was demonstrating that she could speak fluent English and that she was a U.S. citizen. And I think it was a matter of, let's see if she is a U.S. citizen. And if she is, then we'll slap on these charges. It's an issue of arrest now, ask questions later.
So straight up racial profiling?
100%. Andrea Velez she's a darker skinned Latino, and 100% I believe that this was racial profiling.
We have to leave it there. We'll continue to follow this case. Dominique Boubion, one of the attorneys helping to represent Andrea Velez, a U.S. citizen arrested by ICE. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more. This is Democracy.
Like the Supreme Court just took away the court's ability to stop the president from doing all kinds of illegal stuff. And the Supreme Court just made your constitutional rights contingent on your zip code. You might recall that in January, President Trump issued an executive order directing federal agencies to stop recognizing the U.S. citizenship of children born to undocumented or temporary status parents. District courts in Seattle, Boston, and Baltimore enjoined the policy, citing a century of Supreme Court precedent affirming birthright citizenship. Their injunctions applied nationwide, prohibiting the government from enforcing the birthright citizenship order against everyone while the cases made their way up to the Supreme Court. However, in a 6-3 ruling, the Supreme Court decided these injunctions, quote, likely exceed the equitable authority Congress has granted to federal courts. So the court granted Trump's application to partially stay the injunctions. As a result, Trump's order is going to become effective in 28 states within 30 days. And without the ability to enjoin the executive branch, it's possible that every illegal thing the president orders will go into effect unless and until the Supreme Court finally weighs in, which can take years, if the Supreme Court even deigns to take up the case. Now, the court insists this is just a procedural fix. Courts can now only block laws within their jurisdiction. But the Supreme Court's decision in this case, Trump versus Casa, means that the same federal policy ruled unconstitutional in one jurisdiction can still be enforced in another. This is going to create a patchwork of federal laws where your rights depend on where you live. A family in Maryland might be protected from Trump's policy because someone went through the time and expense to file an actual lawsuit and their court blocked it, while a family in Texas remains fully exposed to the same law, even if the underlying legal issues are identical. And this decision puts the onus on individual plaintiffs who often have meager resources to file or join lawsuits to protect their constitutional rights, and do so all the way to the Supreme Court. And it encourages President Trump, with the full backing of the Justice Department, to fight every lawsuit tooth and nail, stalling for as long as possible. And worse, if the administration loses, maybe they just won't appeal. Who cares if it's illegal in one little district, or maybe not even in the full district, maybe just those particular plaintiffs? Fine, there are 93 other federal districts throughout the country, and millions of other potential plaintiffs. Ultimately, this is going to lead to a legal landscape of systemic inequality, and we've already seen what happens when basic rights end at the state line. It was called Jim Crow. But today we're going to break down Trump versus Casa. Now, to understand how we got here and why the Supreme Court's ruling changes so much, we have to start with the basics. Federal district courts have traditionally exercised their equitable powers to enjoin the enforcement of federal laws and policies, not only as to the named plaintiffs, but broadly when necessary to prevent widespread constitutional harm. After all, laws or executive orders apply nationally, so it makes sense that if they're unconstitutional, a court would be able to block their implementation nationally. Now, where did courts get the power to issue such sweeping decrees? Well, from the broad equity authority granted to federal district courts. A court's equitable powers allow the courts to craft remedies that go beyond simply awarding money. They can order people to stop doing things, start doing things, or block the government from enforcing laws. And that's where injunctive relief comes in. And there are several types of injunctions, depending on the stage of the case and the urgency of the harm. For short-term disputes, courts can issue a temporary restraining order, or TRO, which usually expires after 14 days. A court can also grant a preliminary injunction, which preserves the status quo until the end of the litigation. And for a long-term solution, courts can grant a permanent injunction, which is ordered after a final judgment on the merits. Now, Trump versus Casa involved a dispute about just how far these injunctions could go. Nationwide injunctions enjoin the government from enforcing the law or policy against anyone in the country, not just the plaintiffs who filed the lawsuit. Now, there's no specific federal statute that authorizes specifically nationwide injunctions. There's no statute that says they don't have that power, but generally the power comes from a combination of the Judiciary Act of 1789 and its successors, and the court's equitable powers under Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 65 and the Declaratory Judgment Act. Now, as these sweeping injunctions have become more frequent, they've drawn fire from both Democratic and Republican administrations on pragmatic grounds because they give a single district court the authority to stop the implementation of a national policy. And certain litigants figured this out, so that led to forum shopping, where litigants strategically filed lawsuits in districts where they know they would get a favorable judge for their cause. And this problem was best illustrated by Judge Matthew Kacsmaryk, the only judge in the Northern District of Texas Amarillo Division. Now, after the Supreme Court reversed Roe v. Wade, anti-abortion litigants flocked to Judge Kacsmaryk's courtroom, because they know how he would rule on those issues. In 2023, Kacsmaryk issued a nationwide injunction blocking the FDA's approval of the abortion drug known as mifepristone. But the plaintiffs there were guaranteed to get Judge Kacsmaryk because he was the only judge in that area. And coincidentally, on the same day, Judge Rice of the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Washington granted a broad injunction enjoining the FDA from changing its guidance on mifepristone. Judge Rice's decision applied to 17 states and Washington, D.C. Now, these dueling injunctions created confusion and chaos, and all this happened before the courts had opportunity to rule on the merits after a full briefing and argument. But in either case, very few people argued that the solution was no nationwide injunctions. The solution was obviously don't have a division where only a single judge is sitting, so the plaintiffs were guaranteed to get a right-wing whack job. But while nationwide injunctions were an important tool to check federal power and unconstitutional moves, judges also had the ability to abuse their injunctive powers. But that's why the limits placed on injunctions were so important. And it all started with the legal standard for obtaining an injunction. Judges are not supposed to hand them out like candy. A preliminary injunction is an extraordinary and drastic remedy. And to get one, a party has to show they will suffer irreparable injury if the court doesn't act before the case is resolved on the merits. And the injury typically has to be something more than just loss of income or money. And because they're so coercive, courts are supposed to tailor injunctions to be no more burdensome than necessary, just enough to give complete relief to the parties in the case. But the practical reality is that nationwide injunctions were increasingly polarized. A study by Harvard Law Review concluded that nationwide injunctions are becoming more frequent, and they are, quote, overwhelmingly issued by judges appointed by presidents of the opposite party from the administration whose actions the judges are enjoining. Of the 78 nationwide injunctions issued during the Trump and Biden administrations, 93.6 of the injunctions were issued by judges appointed by a president of the opposing political party. But if you're going to sue the Trump administration, you're going to want a good lawyer. But if you want a great lawyer, my law firm, the Eagle Team, can help. If you've got in a car crash, suffered a data breach, especially if you've got a data breach letter saying your information might have been leaked, or dealing with a workers' comp or social security issue, we can represent you or help find you the right attorney. And by the way, we don't get paid unless you do, so there's nothing up front. So just click on the link in the description or call the phone number on screen for a free consultation with my team. Because you don't just need a legal team, you need the Eagle Team. And that brings us to Trump versus CASA. Now, as Liz Dye explained on the channel earlier this year, for over a century, anyone born on U.S. soil has automatically been given citizenship, regardless of their parents' immigration or citizenship status. Birthright citizenship is rooted in the 14th Amendment, which guarantees all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. And the 1898 Supreme Court case of United States versus Wong Kim Ark established birthright citizenship for children of all immigrants. It is considered a bedrock principle of constitutional law. But while denying citizenship to children of immigrants was once a fringe position, it is now the official policy of the Republican Party. Here's President Trump explaining that the 14th Amendment only conferred citizenship on children of enslaved people.
That was meant for the babies of slaves. It wasn't meant for people trying to scam the system and come into the country on a vacation.
And so on January 20, 2025, President Trump issued an executive order excluding certain children of non-citizens born in the United States from birthright citizenship. Plaintiffs impacted by the executive order filed several lawsuits. The courts enjoined Trump from enforcing the order because it was very clearly unconstitutional. And in this case, the Trump administration did not ask the Supreme Court to overturn Wong Kim Ark because the court probably wouldn't do that. At least that's what we think now, check back in a year. But instead, Trump asked the justices to limit the scope of injunctions entered by the lower courts because they do not have the power to grant relief to plaintiffs who were not included in the lawsuits. In response, the plaintiffs argued that, quote, being directed to follow the law as it has been universally understood for over 125 years is not an emergency warranting the extraordinary remedy of a stay of the injunction. But Trump argued that, quote, years of experience have shown that the executive branch cannot properly perform its functions if any judge anywhere can enjoin every presidential action everywhere. Now, the court consolidated the three cases, but explicitly did not rule on the constitutionality of birthright citizenship. And in a majority opinion authored by Justice Barrett, the majority considered only the procedural issue. And the court held that the injunctions, quote, likely exceeded the equitable authority that Congress has given to the federal courts under the Judiciary Act and Rule 65. So the justices granted partial stays of the district court orders, limiting them to what's necessary to give the plaintiffs before the court complete relief. And in reaching that ruling, Justice Barrett considered the meaning of the Judiciary Act of 1789. Quote, universal injunctions were not a feature of federal court litigation until sometime in the 20th century, and they remained rare until the turn of the 21st century. Which is true, but first of all, the nature of power between the executive branch and the legislative branch has changed over time. Congress used to be able to, do stuff and pass laws, and now for various reasons it can't. So presidents, mainly starting with George W. Bush, continuing with President Obama, Trump, Biden, and now Trump too, started relying extensively on executive orders for more and more things. And secondly, when you're dealing with a true authoritarian president who everyone agrees signed an incredibly unconstitutional executive order, which is not law, that abrogates birthright citizenship as well as a whole bunch of other completely unconstitutional executive orders, it really seems like the default position should be for federal courts to temporarily enjoin that during the course of the litigation. These are executive orders where there isn't a single American for whom the executive order could be legally enforced. And it really seems like Barrett's opinion is originalism motivated to get to a specific outcome. Since nationwide injunctions did not exist in 1789, the courts do not have the power to use them now. And the majority held that, quote, because the universal injunction lacks a historical pedigree, it falls outside of the bounds of the federal court's equitable authority under the Judiciary Act. Now, I find this reasoning to be extremely unpersuasive. This gets into some technical legalisms, but first, federal judges' power comes from multiple statutes or laws that have been passed over time, as well as the Constitution itself. Now, originalism theoretically seeks to divine what lawmakers intended the law to mean when it was passed. And when you're interpreting statutes, you generally don't look to English common law, because who cares what happened in English common law, because we passed the friggin' law to pass the law. So you look at the law itself. Now, second, Barrett is just dead wrong on the history. When you look at the common law and the courts of England, you see that equitable remedies were always intended to be flexible to right wrongs that courts of law couldn't address. And on top of that, really, for technical reasons, the distinction between courts of equity and courts of law doesn't really even matter in modern American courts. But as Justice Sotomayor points out in her dissent, courts of equity in England often decided issues for interested parties who were not party to the actual suit before the court. That was Barrett's main concern, that the universal injunctions bind parties who were outside of the actual litigation itself. But third, in any event, equitable remedies are the original flexible remedy. And as I mentioned, the nature of the executive has changed over time, and it makes total sense that the nature of equitable remedies would expand to address the expansion of executive power. But a lot of what the majority talked about was in terms of what was necessary for complete relief for the plaintiffs. The plaintiffs here argued that they could only get complete relief from the unconstitutional policy if the injunctions applied to everyone. Justice Barrett disagreed. Quote, prohibiting enforcement of the executive order against the child of an individual pregnant plaintiff will give that plaintiff complete relief. Her child will not be denied citizenship. Extending that injunction to cover all other similarly situated individuals would not render her relief any more complete. And although the plaintiffs argued that universal injunctions, quote, give the judiciary a powerful tool to check the executive branch, Justice Barrett countered that checking the executive's power was not a legitimate consideration in this instance. Quote, federal courts do not exercise general oversight of the executive branch. They resolve cases and controversies consistent with the authority Congress has given them. Yeah, but the judiciary's branch is to interpret the laws, determine what's constitutional, and stop the executive from doing unconstitutional stuff all the time. And if the executive does something that's illegal and unconstitutional with respect to 10 million people, and you only enjoin them from putting that into effect for 2 people, then it's kind of a Pyrrhic victory. But the thing is, in these cases, the government is a party to the litigation. Why can the federal court not enjoin that party who's before the court and stop it from taking an action across the entire country? And as we'll talk about, Justice Kavanaugh's solution is that it's just going to be the Supreme Court that deals with these issues on the shadow docket. But if we're really going to go down this legal rabbit hole, if the lower courts can't issue a universal injunction, why would the Supreme Court be able to? And why would the executive be bound by the Supreme Court's decision outside of the very litigants who are in front of the court? Because the upper and lower federal courts share the same source of authority. And of course, it's very suspicious why the Supreme Court didn't address this issue during President Biden's term, when district courts routinely issued nationwide injunctions that halted his COVID policies and student loan programs. For example, in the past, Justice Gorsuch has been the most outspoken opponent of nationwide injunctions, and yet he affirmed universal injunctions against the Biden administration at least 10 times, according to research by Professor Steve Vladeck. In any event, as it stands now, the executive order will become effective in 28 states within 30 days. The children it targets will be American citizens in 22 states where lower courts block the order, but newborn children in the other 28 states will be basically stateless unless some plaintiffs in those districts are able to quickly file legal challenges in every jurisdiction. And unfortunately, the Supreme Court doesn't give the lower courts a clear roadmap for how they are determined what constitutes complete relief. Must plaintiffs file lawsuits in all 50 states and the District of Columbia in order to ensure that every newborn to foreign parents becomes an American citizen? And what if the Trump administration challenges the scope of the injunctive relief in some of those states? The appellate courts are bound to follow Trump versus Casa, so they could stay the injunctions while Trump makes his legal argument.
I'm laughing not because this is funny. I'm laughing just because of how of a ridiculous ridiculous state of affairs. How we are literally putting people's lives on hold. It's like, yeah, you were born here, but that doesn't make you a citizen, maybe. How are we at a place where, yeah, you were born here on American soil, but that doesn't make you a citizen? But that doesn't make you a citizen. Wow. Okay.
Arguments. And during that time, Trump could continue to inflict constitutional injuries on plaintiffs all over the country. So this is not a recipe for judicial efficiency. And critics of this decision point out that this fracturing is exactly why nationwide injunctions are sometimes necessary. They prevent a patchwork of different laws and to eliminate costly and duplicative litigation. But the answer of the majority in this case is that plaintiffs should file nationwide class action lawsuits. And this could be a semi-reasonable workaround. But it also assumes that the Supreme Court allows them to go forward when it has been extremely hostile to class actions for some time. But at base, to get a nationwide injunction, plaintiffs will now have to go through the somewhat rigorous class certification process. To certify a class action, plaintiffs have to satisfy all 4 requirements of Rule 23, and moving for Rule 23 class certification is both a fact and legal issue, which is why moving for class certification usually comes after discovery in most cases. But to do so, first, plaintiffs have to prove that there are so many people affected that it's impractical to sue individually. Second, there must be questions of law or fact common to the class. Third, the lead plaintiff's claims must be typical of the class. Basically, their story has to represent the group with no outliers or special treatment. And fourth, the named plaintiffs and their lawyers must be ready to fairly and adequately protect the interests of the class. So that means no conflicts of interest and other things. So going the class action route is at best an impediment, and at worst, a huge procedural roadblock that could waylay a lot of these cases. And you can argue this is a good thing, but the practical reality is that the Supreme Court is tightening the rules for nationwide class actions at the same time that they're going to make it easier for the government to blatantly violate people's rights. And it really seems tone deaf to what this particular administration is doing in reality. And of course, during oral argument, Trump's Solicitor General, John Sauer, said the administration would fight class certification on nationwide classes. Meanwhile, Justices Alito and Thomas filed concurring opinions warning district courts to strictly apply the rules governing class actions. Quote, lax enforcement of those requirements for third-party standing and class certification would create a potentially significant loophole to today's decision. And in a concurring opinion, Justice Kavanaugh proposed another solution for the problem of patchwork rights, just asked the Supreme Court for more guidance. Kavanaugh recognized that it's important for federal rights to apply uniformly to everyone, but he says it's only the Supreme Court that should be the ones that make that call. He writes, quote, this court should not and cannot hide in the tall grass. When we receive such an application, we must grant or deny. He says the court's decision will often serve as, quote, guidance throughout the United States until the issue is finally resolved. I mean, sure, plaintiffs would definitely welcome swift decisions on these major constitutional issues, especially one that's as clear as birthright citizenship. But the Supreme Court actually had discretion to consolidate all the birthright citizenship cases and decide them on the merits if it wanted to. Had the court done so, all of the future litigation that we've been talking about would have been avoided. But instead, the court chose to make the procedural rule that invites future court invention.
What kind of timeline are we in? What kind of timeline are we in? We're arguing about if people born in the United States are citizens or not. Wow, he's gonna have a UFC fight at the White House. What timeline are we in? What was I saying? Somebody, a hippo farted and it fucked with the timeline?
Kavanaugh is inviting Trump and his critics to use the court's emergency docket even more. So one way to look at this ruling is it's giving way more power to the executive, while at the same time amassing more power for itself, elevating it even more above the lower district courts. Now, the 3 dissenting justices said the decision was a setback for civil rights in some of the most scorching language I've ever seen. They said that nationwide injunctions were essential to protect constitutional rights on a broad scale.
Okay. Pie in the sky. It's a very bad ruling, right? Everybody's kind of freaking out over it, right? It's like, national injunction is done. you got to file all these lawsuits separately. You got to do the class action. Class action's really hard. They already said they're going to make it harder. Okay, they said all this, right? And they've been kind of giving us some shitty rulings lately, right? If this was the setup, Amy Coney Barrett, because she got real. She's been getting a lot of heat from the other side, all right? So maybe this is her Trojan horse. Like, okay, guys, sorry. Like, here we go. We're gonna do this. See, the thing is like the national injunction is not dead. It's just harder. But now that they've ruled on this, maybe because essentially, like, the only way to get an national injunction is through the Supreme Court, but they have said, sorry, I just have cat hair everywhere. They have said that they're gonna, they're gonna review these cases faster. So it definitely is possible. Just go through the steps. So they mapped out how to get a national injunction. Okay. So now that they do it procedurally the correct way, now they don't really have an excuse. When it comes the right way, now she has like cover. It's like, okay, well, we got rid of the national injunction, but now we're here. They did it correctly, and now we have to, rule on it. So now we're gonna take a look at like, oh, can he rewrite the Constitution without Congress? So, yeah. So maybe that be.
Justice Sotomayor focused on the legal standard for granting injunctive relief. She asked, quote, "What grave harm does the executive face that prompts a majority of this court to grant it relief?" The answer, the government says, is the inability to enforce the citizenship order against non-parties. For the majority, that answer suffices. See, for example, when a federal court enters a universal jurisdiction against the government, it improperly intrudes on a coordinate branch of the government and prevents the government from enforcing its policies against non-parties. The problem, however, is that the executive branch has no right to enforce the citizenship order against anyone. As the executive itself once put it, the order is unquestionably unconstitutional. It defies logic to say that maintaining a centuries-long status quo for a few months longer will irreparably injure the government. The issue, the perceived injury to the Trump administration, is a theme that Justice Sotomayor has raised in several recent dissents. And she explains yet again how dubious this analysis of harm really is. Quote, "The majority's contrary position is self-refuting. Suppose an executive order barred women from receiving unemployment benefits or black citizens from voting. Is the government irreparably harmed and entitled to emergency relief by a district court order universally enjoining such policies? The majority apparently would say yes." Justice Jackson wrote separately to say, quote, "Today's ruling allows the executive to deny people rights the founders plainly wrote into our Constitution, so long as those individuals have not found a lawyer or asked a court in a particular manner to have their rights protected. This perverse burden shifting cannot coexist with the rule of law." In essence, the court has now shoved lower court judges out of the way in cases where executive action is challenged and has gifted the executive with the prerogative of sometimes disregarding the law. As a result, the judiciary, the one institution that is solely responsible for ensuring our republic endures as a nation of laws, has put both our legal system and our system of government in grave jeopardy. So now what? Well, within hours of the decision, several groups in this case filed a nationwide class action challenging the executive order. This all but guarantees that the Supreme Court will have to decide a major case on whether nationwide classes should.